upgrade aging wastewater infrastructure, safeguard public health, and improve water quality throughout the state, including in Long Island Sound. A few other priorities that are in the governor's capital budget. I'll note state parks and infrastructure is a central one. The governor recommends $70 million over the biennium for alterations, renovations, and new construction at state parks and recreation facilities. We have been implementing an initiative called Restore Connecticut State Parks over the last few years, recognizing that we have some really important and treasured facilities across our state park system that, over the years, we've accumulated some deferred maintenance. And the Lamont administration, with bipartisan legislative support, has been making significant generational investment in upgrading these facilities all across the state. And you can see project-specific upgrades on our website at Restore CT State Parks. The Governor Lamont's capital budget also proposed about $25 million to address hazardous waste disposal sites and $24 million for industrial site remediation in urban areas. And this is critical to address some of the most challenging and complex pollution, including at the Durham Meadows Superfund site and the Raymark site in Stratford. Additionally, funding continues for PFAS contamination response through the Potable Water Grant Program at $10 million, which is helping to protect private wells, which our state has a significant number of residents relying on private wells for drinking water. And so this funding is critical to help protect them from harmful pollutants. We also have a nation-leading program to help increase community safety from extreme weather events. It started off as a focus on microgrids, but over the last few years, it's been expanded to support climate resilience across a whole host of different measures that can help protect communities. And certainly, as we saw, events like the intense flooding in the Naugatuck Valley last summer, we see the criticality of continuing to provide this funding, which is intended to help communities build proactively the kind of infrastructure that can help make those kinds of extreme weather events less damaging. And finally, energy efficiency in state buildings. We have a strong track record over many years of making capital improvements in state facilities to lower operating costs. It helps to in terms of reducing energy and utility usage in these facilities. That helps to reduce the operating costs for these facilities to the taxpayer. And so the governor recommends another $10 million over the biennium to support energy upgrades in state facilities. But as you can see, DEEP is proud to implement a whole host of different programs. We have a very diverse mission. Happy to take any questions that you may have about our capital programs. And I will, as you'll see, be introducing others from the team to speak more directly to those programs.
Great, Commissioner. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'll start off with a couple of questions regarding your program for state parks. And so can you talk to what capital improvements for state parks are coming in the future? Which state parks should receive some kind of capital improvements in the near future?
Good morning, folks. My name is Mason Trumbull. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Environmental Conservation. And to answer your question, we have 142 state parks and forests. We have a lot of projects across those 142 state parks. So really those projects fall into three buckets. They fall into projects that improve the public experience. Think, paving projects, improvements to campgrounds, improvements to beaches, those types of things. Then we also have projects that fall into our historic buildings categories. So think Gillette Castle State Park, Hubline Tower, Fort Trumbull, those types of historic structures. And then the last category is the structures that we need to have in place in order to maintain our parks. So think maintenance buildings, those types of things. So really, there's a lot of projects. That's why we put them all on the website, much more than I'd have time to explain to you all this morning. But they're all there on Restore Connecticut State Parks. We update that website accordingly, and all the projects fall into those three major buckets.
So future parks that will be addressed through capital are actually on the website.
Exactly. So as we add additional, as we fund additional projects, we put those up on our website. So everything that's on our website, you can see some of those projects have been completed. Some of those projects are underway.
That's great. Okay. And can you talk to me a little bit about, we know that the Passport to Parks program has been really successful, right? You know, after COVID, we found that lots of people are utilizing our park system, and it's really a gem of Connecticut. And so has Passport to Parks been helpful on the bond side? Have you used resources from that program?
Yeah, that's a great question. One that I think is, I'm glad you asked it because it's one that we'd like to clarify. So we primarily use Passport to Parks to fund our operations. So think our 600 seasonal staff that we hire, fuel costs, vehicles, those types of things, trash, all the operational utilities, all the operational costs that run into our parks, whereas our bonding is primarily focused on those capital improvements. So that's how we separate those two funds. But yeah, thank you. Without Passport to Parks, we certainly would not be able to keep our parks open and operating.
Great. No, thanks for that explanation. And so just continuing along with that same program, I have noticed that there is an unallocated balance there, right? So are you all in a good place with that, or is that something you would ask the subcommittee to take another look at?
Can you clarify? Are you talking about Passport? Or are you talking about?
Sure. I'm talking about alterations, renovations, and new construction at state parks and other recreational facilities, including Americans with Disabilities Act improvements.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. So that's a great question. Our projects, there's a 2 to 3, sometimes more year runway, depending on the size and the complexity of the project. So think permitting, we often work with our partners at DAS to run projects that are over a certain dollar amount. And so while you do see some funds there, those projects are upcoming. And so we're not able to, we're trying to keep ourselves in a pattern of, instead of having big spikes in funding and then big drops, we're trying to keep ourselves in a pattern of doing about $30 million of work a year. So that's our goal. And so I do think our needs there are much greater than even what's here. But I think this is the amount that we're able to do sustainably. More than $70 million. I think we get into a place where we're not actually able to do the work. So
great. Thank you for that.
Representative, my name is Andrew Hoskins. I'm the chief of staff at DEEP. And I'll just say there's some discrepancy, I think, between the materials maybe that you have and kind of the latest information. So we do not have an unallocated balance in that program.
Okay. If you can send us what you have, that would be great. Okay.
Yep. We received our latest $30 million allocation back in October of last year, I believe.
Okay. Fair enough. I would recognize our co-chair, Senator Miller.
Good morning, and I apologize for being late. Ran into traffic. Good morning, Commissioner. I hope all is well. I have a host of questions, so I'll ask a couple and then I'll ask the chair to circle back. The first thing I wanted to ask you was your staff. How many of you, do you know the number of the number of staff that are federally employed or you use federal dollars to pay their salaries? Do you have that number by any chance?
Again, my name is Andrew Hoskins. I'm the chief of staff at DEEP. We have out of our about 980 staff, about 187 are fully federally funded. And then about 1/3 of our total staff time is coded to federal sources. So that includes the 187 staff that are, 100% on federal funds, as well as additional eligible time from other employees as well.
So I can assume if dollars stop flowing from Washington, that would greatly impact your agency.
Thank you. Yes, well, it's certainly something that we're concerned about. We implement, as you know, a very broad set of programs, and some of them include responsibilities that have been delegated. They're federal responsibilities delegated down to the state level. So to the extent that should we see any decrease in federal funding for those base programs, that would certainly, without some accompanying reduction in the responsibilities for those federally implemented programs, I think we are concerned about what the challenges we might face in being able to deliver on our mission.
And I know that some of your programs are federally funded as well as the staff. So I was wondering if you could send, not to ask you for it now, to
Mhm.
send over to our committee a list of those programs that would be impacted should the federal dollars stop flowing from Washington.
We can certainly provide that information.
All right, thank you. Um, piggybacking on my co-chair's question regarding the parks, Commissioner, when I was chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, we talked about the park that was in New Haven, was it? And there was a problem with the campers, and I guess there was an overflow of some not so nice waste. And I was just wondering, I forgot which park, was it the East? Just want to know if that had been corrected.
So there's a couple of parks in East Haven that we've funded. Some of them are state parks, and other parks have been funded through the bond, through bond allocations to DEEP that we've passed on to the municipality. Are you talking about West Rock Ridge
Yep,
State
that's
Park?
it.
Yeah, so a few years ago, you're right, we did get a bond allocation specific to West Rock Ridge State Park. Those funds were primarily for the paving of the parking lot at the top and the road going up to the top, as well as some road work. So we've completed that work. We're glad to see that project being wrapped up and the improvements being made there.
I thought there was a problem with some sewage there. Was it that park or another park?
That was not ringing a bell for West
Okay.
for
I'll
West
find out
Rock
which
Ridge.
park. I want to talk to Representative Walker to find out exactly which park, but it was a park in New Haven where there were some campers there and there was a whole mishap. But I'll get that information to you. So thank you. And if I may, my last question for this round, if you could circle back. I had asked you about the staffing. Bottle redemption centers, that's an issue for Lower Fairfield County. We've increased the number of bottles that can be redeemed at a store. I think it's 250 is the max. And one particular store owner it's a huge issue. And we definitely need a center in the Stanford area. So have there been any applications or plans submitted to your agency?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your question. My name is Jennifer Perry. I am the Bureau Chief for Materials Management and Compliance Assurance with Connecticut DEEP. We have funded a number of new redemption centers through a bottle redemption center grant program that we previously were administering. We have used all of that available funding. So we don't have any available funding for new applications for new redemption centers. That doesn't mean that we may not see additional redemption centers being stood up and people applying for registration, but we have not seen anything recently.
So it was my understanding when we passed the legislation that part of that 10 cents and the expansion is to go towards redemption centers, no?
So there is no additional funding going into that redemption center grant program.
Okay.
And the additional funds will go to the owners and the distributors. So they'll actually get some additional funding on a per container basis. And it is an increase over what they were receiving previously to help support them.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand you. There is no funding for new additional redemption centers.
Correct. There's no
Okay.
additional
Funding.
coming in to provide grants for
Okay,
new
to
redemption
provide the
centers.
grants. All right. Thank
Senator,
you.
there was we can provide some follow-up material on this. There was a one-time, at the time that the enhancements to the bottle bill program were enacted, there was also authorized a one-time amount of funding for this grant program that DEEP administered to help attract or work with private businesses to attract the development of more redemption centers, particularly in underserved areas. But all of that funding has been exhausted. We can provide a list of all the grantees that were awarded. To the extent that there's a sheet from the 10 cents, that those funds do not go into that grant program. That was sort of a one-time
So that was one time.
grant program, correct?
Thank you for the clarification because honestly, that's the reason I signed. I voted yes for the bill because the promise that the monies would go into, there would be redemption centers in the marginalized or the underserved communities. And so it saddens me that that money is no longer available and we can't have additional centers in underserved areas.
We
like
did
mine.
award everything that we were authorized, but
No.
yeah, but we're happy to.
So we can use
follow
the
up.
more money. Okay. All right. So if I may, Mr. Chair, if you could circle back to me, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. Any further questions for Commissioner Dykes? Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry for being late, and good morning, everyone. And if the question's already been asked, I apologize. The Clean Water Fund, are the existing unallocated funds enough to cover both the wastewater and the drinking water projects? I know there's some new allocation and funding, but clean water is very important. So if you could.
Good morning, Senator.
Good
My
morning.
name is Graham Stevens. I'm the Chief of Water Protection and Land Reuse. And yes, we definitely agree that clean water is important, whether it be for drinking or for sustaining our streams and ecosystems. So the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has a direct charge for our Clean Water Fund, which is used for upgrading, maintaining our 93 wastewater treatment plants and associated systems. And the Department of Public Health utilizes the drinking water state revolving funds to provide funding to upgrade public water systems. So we, in this, we look at these two funds, although they look blended in some cases, as separate funds. And we do seek funding, whether it be authorizations or allocations, to address both needs. DEEP does serve somewhat of a, like a ministerial role for DPH so that we have efficiencies. And we liaise with the Office of the Treasurer, who actually does an amazing job investing and helping us with this revolving fund to manage it in accordance with, all bonding rules. So I hope that answers your question, but I can definitely dig in on any.
It kind of offers some context to the general public in regards to the unique relationship and dynamics you have with clean water and waste treatment with public health in regards to water management. And obviously in planning and development, we're very concerned about sewage allocations and design to manage our clean water. So it's something that's very important, but also recognizing, I appreciate using the word ministerial from a context that you're managing relationships with multiple bodies. Second question would be in the area of landfill management. In the town of Fairfield, we've got a bit of a mess that's continually a concern. Is there minimum funding for Superfund sites and landfill cleanups? And what landfills does the state oversee? And two, what is the current kind of strategy and plan and funding related to, for me on a personal interest level, the town of Fairfield? Through you.
Great. Thank you, Senator. As you know, we have spoken about the unfortunate Fairfield issue in the past. And that issue is one where we have some inappropriate fill that was stockpiled and inappropriately managed. The funding that we have for landfills closure and stewardship is related to our state and federal Superfunds designated sites. That site in Fairfield, as troubling and problematic as it is, thankfully does not pose the grave public risk that some of our historical industrial landfills, illegally operated landfills do, because of the scoring system that we use when evaluating the risk through the Superfund program. Typically, what brings a landfill from the category of, an area of waste consolidation to one of, significant public health concern is when that landfill was not properly managed and is impacting public drinking water wells or even worse, a public drinking water system. So EPA has a scoring process that the department uses to evaluate whether a site is a federal or state Superfund site, or whether it needs to be managed by the owner. And in some limited instances, DEEP does have stewardship of former landfills that were operated by the former CRA, which we can get into if you wish as well.
How many landfills of the super site nature are you monitoring right now, if I may?
I can get you the full list, but there's 13 Superfund sites in Connecticut, and I believe 6 or 7 of those are former landfills. But we can get you the full list, and I believe it's in the paperwork that we submitted to the committee.
Great. And the last point is from an economic development standpoint, there's been allocations and funding related to brownfield remediation to kind of reclaim that land for economic development. Is that been part of the initiative? And how is that coordination with DECD and municipalities that are looking to redevelop that?
Great question. One of my favorite topics is brownfields. This is something that everyone can give support for, because, typically these sites are located in our urban and village centers. And at one point we're the heartbeat of those communities. Everyone lived and walked to work, walked, to restaurants, and it was the lifeblood of Connecticut, right? Connecticut is the, industrial heritage here is unparalleled. Now, the way that we manage trying to address those brownfields in the state of Connecticut is through a joint partnership between DEEP and DECD. We are the regulator that sets the standard for cleanup, and DECD is the economic development folks who identify for us priority projects. And when they identify those priority projects, we can either provide funding for a certain subset through our Urban Sites Remedial Action Program, which is one of our bond programs, or DECD also runs a competitive grant round multiple times per year for both private parties to obtain loans, low interest loans, or municipalities to obtain grants. And they do so through the economic development lens. In addition, more recently, thanks to some additional funding from the federal government under the bipartisan infrastructure law, under Commissioner Dyke's leadership, she directed us to use some of that money to fund some non-traditional brownfields. These are brownfields within the community, which may not serve the best. It may not be a classic economic development, but it is important community development projects, whether it be parks, whether it be open space, whether it be a community asset. And we're funding through that at competitive grant rounds, a smaller subset and usually smaller cost cleanups of brownfields that are directly within the community and the fabric of our EJ communities.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure there are other questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Appreciate it. And team, appreciate it. And while Graham's here, I guess I'll go to the Clean Water Act. It seems that, we have our caucus members asking us to, try and get their projects on the bond package, so to speak. And so some of my caucus members have approached me with Clean Water Act type projects. And it seems that it's a lion's share of your bonding. It seems there's a lot of money here. And it seems like your language is broad enough to accommodate updated pipes and that kind of thing. So I immediately tell them, this looks like a Clean Water Act project. Go to the Clean Water Act and you'll get on the bond package. And it seems that some of them have been saying, no, we tried, it doesn't go. So I don't know if you could even answer that question, but I just wanted to just let you know what I'm going through as a ranking member of the bonding subcommittee.
Well, thank you for that. It is our largest capital program. And I think it reflects, how important Connecticut has made protecting our waterways and reducing pollution and contamination to our waterways in the state, that it is such a significant and has been such a significant part of DEEP's capital program for a long time. because of this funding, we are able to help provide generous support to municipalities to make the improvements that they need to, including at their wastewater treatment plants. We have, because this is a mature program that's been around for a long time, as you can imagine, it has a pretty clear set of rules and a framework for how the funding is allocated. There's a lot of different types of supports that we can provide for municipalities, from technical assistance all the way up to low-cost financing and direct grants and aid that's provided in a match formula. All of this is spelled out first in statute and then in regulations that were approved to implement that statutory framework. And it spells out sort of the formulas and the recipe for what's eligible under all these different buckets of funding, and what percentage or how much funding a municipality could receive under each program. We have a priority list that DEEP maintains, and we update it annually. And so we'd be happy to work with any municipality to help guide them through the process for getting submitting a project. Some of the projects have to be submitted to the priority list. Some are also, there's for some types of smaller dollar amounts, there are also reserves that are available on a first come, first served basis. And so, be glad to follow up if there's any particular projects or entities that are seeking or looking for support to help them understand how the program works.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that answer, and I will do that with a follow-up. Do you have like just a list of, I don't, like an example of what you've done? Maybe just not too much work, but just like the last couple years of.
Absolutely. We can give you a list of our last two priority lists.
Okay.
Which are, like I mentioned before, 93 wastewater treatment plants, serves almost 3 million people in Connecticut. And, in 2022, we asked those municipalities, what are your needs over the next 20 years? And it's getting close to $10 billion. And that's to meet the, federal and state requirements for maintaining those systems in accordance with the Clean Water Acts of the states. So there definitely are a tremendous amount of municipal needs. And keep in mind, this program is really a municipal grant and aid program, because it funds, either a 2% loan or a grant for the municipalities to meet these federal and state requirements. But we definitely know that it's a big pot of money, and we take that seriously. And also, there are a lot of other funds that traditionally flow to municipalities for sewer systems, whether it be Urban Act or STEEP, when there's a need, there's an economic development or a housing need for expansion or upgrade, because a lot of municipalities are close to their capacity. So adding significant amount of housing may be a challenge. But there's some other ways where we can fund upgrades to their systems that add that capacity. So really it's an important planning thing. So if you're in a community and you have a long-term strategy to build housing and grow and develop, provided the pipes are where they need to be, then we can work to make sure that the existing infrastructure is not bringing in things that aren't sewerage, right? Because the pipes are old and leaky, and groundwater, and sometimes people's gutters and stormwater can feed into there. We should be saving those pipes for, expansion, development, use of in the existing framework where the sewers are constructed. We want to expand it. Typically, Urban Act or STEEP or, DCD fundings are used for that because it's more of a bigger project.
I would also just note, we're hearing increasingly from communities who have issues and concerns related to stormwater management, as we see more frequent, intense rainstorms that are impacting communities. And we want more communities to do proactive work to help better protect from flooding and stormwater management. We have, through a bill that was passed in 2021, communities now across the state have the option to establish stormwater authorities. New London and New Britain have done so. We're, providing technical assistance to more towns to look into this, to create a recurring revenue stream that the state could then match or leverage to help communities to build out these kinds of infrastructure improvements. And then the microgrids and resilience program, a different capital program, has gotten a lot of great support from the legislature over the last few years, and that's another source of funding that we're providing to municipalities to help them hire consultants, design projects that can help address stormwater management, flooding, and other types of protections against extreme weather events. And that's a much broader sort of eligibility, much smaller dollar amounts. But as you can see, we have lots of different tools in the Swiss Army knife here across the various capital programs the legislatures entrust us with, and that helps us to be able to sit down with municipalities, hear what their needs are, meet them where they are, and provide them, support as best we can. We love to see municipalities trying to proactively tackle these issues because as a result of extreme weather acceleration, in climate change, we're starting, we know that the needs are expanding.
Thank you again, Commissioner. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Pelio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the testimony. This is very helpful with information today. I just wanted to follow up. I know the talk just recently around incinerators, but around food recovery organizations and investing in infrastructure for the many services that they provide. And, really with the proliferation of some of these food service recovery organizations in the state doing great work around keeping this food out of our waste stream, about providing resources to families and individuals suffering from food insecurity. And I see some of the grants and aid to municipalities around incinerators and looking at other types of techniques and equipment to be able to invest in. But around food recovery hubs and some of the other infrastructure that's needed with some of these organizations performing this work, can you address a little bit about that policy and the investment and what DEEP is doing there and what is DEEP willing to do there?
Well, your question is very timely. As just a few days ago, we were in New Haven announcing the award of $15 million of bond funds to a host of different municipalities for small to medium-sized infrastructure upgrades that are helping municipalities, helping different communities advance our goal of regaining self-sufficiency in how the state manages municipal solid waste, so we can reduce the amount that we're relying on out-of-state landfills and communities to accept our garbage. One of the principal ways we can do that is by helping to recover and divert food scraps and organic material from the waste stream. And so some of the grants that we're providing under that we awarded last week are helping to communities to build infrastructure to handle and separate that organic material. But in addition to that, we have are soon to announce the next round of the Sustainable Materials Management grant program. And this is a program, I believe we have about $7.5 million that's remaining in that authorization that we're going to be putting out for RFP. And this has been a very popular program. I credit the legislature and this committee for providing these bond authorizations. It's enabled us to provide direct support to municipalities that are putting in place a host of different innovative programs, again, to help increase recycling, but also reduce the disposal of organics in the waste stream. To date, a lot of those grants have focused on curbside collection or co-collection of organics to divert that material to compost facilities or to anaerobic digesters. But we know that the highest and best use of organic material, if it's appropriate, is for donation and recovery to address food insecurity. So, we'll be glad to, explore in this upcoming RFP, whether we might see any appropriate, projects that might be proposed that would align to that, that priority in the sort of hierarchy of, preferred options for working with organics. We have in the past also used some of these SMM, Sustainable Materials Management grant funds, to fund technical assistance for municipalities and businesses, including restaurants that are looking to donate excess, food and inventory. And so that's yielded some really promising results. So we found that technical assistance, being able to provide that basically free to these to restaurants has been the best way to help them identify the kinds of policies and programs and how to find a partner for donation.
Thank you for those announcements last week. We would have loved to be there as a delegation, but I think we found out pretty much at the 11th hour. But thank you for that. The distinction that I think I would make there, though, and you mentioned the municipalities, a lot of this work is being done independent of the municipalities.
Right.
And so you're having these organizations with just great compassion and drive here, leading the way and creating this direction here. And so I would like just to put that on the record that as you're talking about the direct work and the direct aid to municipalities, municipalities necessarily aren't doing this work alone. So I would again highlight the work of these food service and food recovery organizations, again, with the environmental benefits, but so many other benefits that they're providing to our residents in the state on a daily basis. But thank you. Thank you for your thoughtful answers.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Veach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, team behind her there and on the side of her. Always nice to see all of you. I've got a real quick question here. I'm taking a look at the open space, and I'm just curious as to how many grants have been awarded to municipalities. It doesn't look like anything was done last year in terms of an allocation, but there's some consistency here, 10 million over the past several years. Curious about that, and land acquisition and development for conservation or recreational purposes.
Good morning, Representative. Again, my name is Andrew Hoskins. I'm the Chief of Staff at DEEP. So there's two capital programs that support open space acquisition. One is the Recreation and Natural Heritage Trust Program, which is what the DEEP uses to acquire lands directly to add to our network of state parks and forests, wildlife management areas, et cetera. The second, which I think is the one that you're referring to, is the open space program that supports what we call OSWA, Open Space and Land Acquisition Grant Program. And that's grants to municipalities and nonprofit organizations. It matches at about up to 65 or 75% for distressed municipalities or EJ communities. We run an annual grant round for that program, and we've seen some tremendous momentum in recent years. So last year, we actually had, as far as we can tell, our biggest year ever in terms of awards for that program. So we awarded, I think, 16 projects, which protected 2,600 acres, and it was about $15 million total that was awarded. So, we also have a round that recently closed that's under review. I can't, get into too much detail, but that round is also anticipated to protect about 2,300 additional acres and award about $16 million. So, we've seen some ups and downs over the years, but we're definitely seeing some strong momentum there. We do have an unallocated balance in the program, which I think is why, the governor's budget does not have new authorizations for the biennium. And I think we're confident that we can continue the progress that we've seen in the program and work with, our legislative partners and obviously the governor and OPM, should the need continue to increase and new authorizations are needed at the midterm or something. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that does answer our question. And I know that we have a very active land trust and our municipalities do a lot of applying to some of the grants that you do have available. I just saw that unallocated balance and some non-movement or allocation, so I was kind of curious what was happening with that, with the hopes that maybe some additional funding would become available and we can move some of that unallocated funding into our communities.
Yeah, and I think just to put a fine point on it, we will be seeking as soon as we can an additional allocation of about $15 million to support the current grant round underway. So a big chunk will be taken out of that unallocated balance. And we anticipate, this level of protection continuing for years to come. So.
Great. Thank you for your answers and thank you for all of you for what you do. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Online, we have Representative Constantine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Dykes and your whole staff. I'm looking at the microgrid and resiliency grant and loan programs. I know microgrids and resiliency gets everything was hot topics over on energy and technology. So could you speak about the types of programs you envision with a $5 million allocation for next year and a $25 million allocation for 27?
Yes, hello. This is Graham Stevens again, Chief of Water Protection and Land Reuse. And one of the things that we've done recently is effort into resilience by launching a new Office of Planning and Resilience. This office manages the Deep Climate Resilience Fund. It is not just related to flooding or other things that might be tangential to the work in my bureau, but really looks at resilience as a collective across all aspects of what the department does and all needs that municipalities might have to try to make their communities more resilient. So that Deep Climate Resilience Fund, you may have heard, has already put out a significant number of grants in 2023, totaling some $8.8 million. And many communities are working in planning and project advancement. The goal here is for the state to help municipalities who often don't have the staff resources or ability to pursue these projects and to pursue other funding sources to make their communities more resilient. So these municipalities and community organizations are hiring contractors to produce work that will eventually lead to capital projects that will result in some level of resilience for that community, whether it be energy resilience, flood resilience, resilience to heat, or other resilience functionalities for the municipality. Every municipality is different. Their risks and vulnerabilities are different. So we want to help them understand what those are through planning, help them develop projects through advancement, and then ultimately we want to help them deploy those projects through funding. So we have we are expanding our Deep Climate Resilience Fund, and we'll be putting out a request for proposals that will touch on both the planning, project advancement, and deployment categories. Recently, we put out a deployment only pilot where we're seeking, projects from municipalities who intend to apply for FEMA BRIC, which is the flagship federal program for resilience funding. Because we found that one of the things that municipalities are challenged with is coming up with a non-federal cost share. So we want to share in that cost share by providing some of our bond funds to try to entice those municipalities to take the steps necessary to ensure greater resilience across the state. So we have reviewed those applications. We will be passing them to our sister agency, the Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, who then shuffles those to FEMA for further review. If one of those projects is selected through the federal grant process, we will partner with that municipality in coming up with that additional grant amount. So what we want to do is kind of break down the silos in resilience and, really just, work with the municipalities to understand what their vulnerabilities are and then work with them for planning, advancement, and matching funds.
I'll say we have, we're seeing a significant increase in costs coming onto state program budgets, on municipal budgets, and frankly, on residents and businesses as a result of the extreme weather events that are becoming more frequent and more intense. We experienced a 2-month-long wildfire season last year that was completely unprecedented for the state. The tragic flooding in the Naugatuck Valley that cost at least $200 million in terms of state recovery. Impacted 2,300 homes. We've had near dam failures. We've had flooding impact farmers. These impacts are occurring across the state and projected to become more intense. Certainly, one of the keystones of our strategy has been to try to help communities plan proactively. So this funding is all for proactive investment, not disaster recovery after it's happened, but planning and identifying risks and building infrastructure so that communities can better withstand these impacts. We know that for every dollar invested in proactive climate resilience infrastructure, you get $6 of benefits in terms of avoided costs of impacts down the line. So that's been the key of this program. But many communities don't know what their risks are because these things are new and unprecedented, and they don't know what projects they need to address those risks. So what we've identified is we're offering planning grants to municipalities if you're just starting from scratch to help you get consulting help, including from Circa. Yukon Circa has been incredible support for municipalities to help you figure out what you need to plan for. And then we have a different bucket of funding that we're offering once you know what your risks are to help hire the consultants and design the program, the project, so that you actually have a solution that you can advance. The next big component, part of the strategy of this funding is we want to try to get as much federal funding to cover these costs as possible. So we've designed it around providing splitting the match requirement for FEMA BRIC. FEMA BRIC is one of the biggest federal funding programs for this kind of infrastructure, but it requires a 25% state and local match. And so we've set aside some of these funds to split that match requirement with municipalities to help them take the projects they've planned and designed and put them into the FEMA pipeline. Unfortunately, we're watching very closely what the Trump administration and the new Congress may choose to do in terms of continuing to fund these critical FEMA programs. But that will, if we see that funding interrupted, that will make this bond funding even more important because it remains one of the important sources for communities in Connecticut to help keep these projects moving forward. So we're really appreciative to have this funding. It's very flexible. It can cover everything from, helping design a flood control system, helping design and implement backup power at a wastewater treatment plant, or for a microgrid. There's a whole host of different climate risks that this can support, but it's really about working directly with municipalities so that they can figure out what they need and put it in place.
Thank you. Hey, speaking of flexibility, so if anything changes on the federal level, you'll be able to react or adjust your plans.
That's what that's why we're closely monitoring it. We know that, the BRIC program is still taking applications. It's currently taking applications. So we are looking to support the communities that are going to be applying for that this year. But certainly if we see any interruption to that funding, we will, want to engage with the committee to see, if there's any additional support needed here. But we think given the level of authorizations, we're in good shape with this program, and that's why we, really appreciate the support.
Thank you, Representative. So we are on our second round here. And so just one quick question before I open it up. The John Dempsey research vessel. And so what benefits would another vessel give to that program or our state?
Sure.
Good morning again, Mason Trumbull, Deputy Commissioner for Environmental Conservation. That's a great question. So we're looking to replace the vessel. So we're not looking to get two vessels. We're looking to replace the existing one we have. The existing John Dempsey is a 35-year-old vessel with a 25-year-old manufacturer's recommended use. So we do, for the record, inspect the vessel on a regular basis to make sure it's still safe for our staff to use. But it is nearing the end of its life. And what that vessel does practically for the state is it does twice a year in the fall and the spring. It does a trawl survey of Long Island Sound. And that allows us to track population levels of different fish species in the sound. And that helps us set our commercial fishing regulations and our recreational fishing regulations.
And I would add, if you don't mind, Representative, the vessel is, we never do one thing with one big tool like that vessel. We also use that for water quality monitoring. in the Long Island Sound. We've been doing that monthly since 1986. And unfortunately, like Mason said, that boat is getting old. It almost sank in the Essex boatyard when they were trying to do some repairs. So we are putting a lot of money into maintaining this vessel, which is not really as functional for both fisheries trial surveys, as well as the surveys we do for water quality monitoring. We're monitoring hypoxia, a condition in the Long Island Sound that causes, pollution. The Long Island Sound is one of our most treasured resources, and we need to stay on top of how climate might actually be changing the water quality within that sound, because that brings so much, value, both recreational and economic, right? We've done studies on what that brings to Connecticut's economy. It's significant beyond belief. So this is something that will keep us on task with doing what the federal government requires as far as that monitoring, which brings us funding in the amount of $60 million that go to both Connecticut and New York for projects in the Long Island Sound.
No, thank you for that. And so is the vessel only used on the Sound, or are there other waterways or passages that it's used as well throughout our state?
That is just used within the Long Island Sound. And the other thing that we need to be doing at the request of the federal government is trying to do more near shore sampling. This is a big V-hull vessel that we have, which can't really get into any shallower waters. The new vessel will be able to get into the shallower waters. It will be much, much lighter and quicker. So greater fuel efficiency, greater safety, greater functionality. And it's an incredible asset for the state of Connecticut and the region.
Great, thank you. Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. We talked about the resilience programs and you talked about the fund. How are you funding the fund?
The microgrids and resilience program is funded with bond funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but
the
that's
sole
the
source of funding.
resilience program, you're using that
Exactly.
that item.
We are encouraging municipalities to consider setting up things like stormwater authorities that would provide them an additional revenue source at the local level that then we can use to leverage and match on these bond funds to stretch them further. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to stretch these dollars with FEMA with federal funds too, but this is our main source. The exclusive source of funding for the Deep Climate Resilience Fund is the bond authorizations.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I will be sending over a list of questions because I have quite a few, and I just want to touch on some that you could answer today. I see that some of your programs have been authorized but not allocated. And so I'll send over the list, but there's one in particular that I want to highlight because the senator for that area had asked me about it. And that's the $42 million for the Bridgeport reconstruction of the flood, because Bridgeport has, that they've had problems with flooding since I've been a legislator. And so I was wondering, what is the status of that?
Excellent question, and please give my regards to the senator. So yes, the legislature set aside, I believe, $42 million of bonding to help progress what's called Resilient Bridgeport. And after Superstorm Sandy, South Bridgeport, which is an economically distressed and overburdened community in Bridgeport, was significantly impacted by that flooding. South Bridgeport also hosts a lot of energy infrastructure, which is important to the entire region, and that was put at risk by that storm. So we have partnered with the Department of Housing, who was the original recipient of funding to move forward Resilient Bridgeport, which is a coastal flood defense system to protect this community and its assets. By applying to FEMA BRIC, like the commissioner mentioned earlier, that's the federal primary program for preparing communities to protecting them from climate risks. And we have been provisionally awarded those funds, but there are many requests for information that we're going through with FEMA now. There's additional steps. We're not 100% certain that we will receive those funds, particularly given the federal uncertainties. But if we were not to receive those federal funds, there would need to be a broader conversation about how we move this project forward. This will be, when constructed, one of the most significant, flood defense systems we've built in Connecticut in some time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Graham, I forgot to acknowledge you. Hello, and thank you. I want to thank you for your partnership in your previous role. You were a great partner in me making sure that I address the issues in my community. So I really do appreciate it. There's another one, the heat pump program. Can you give me a status on that one?
So DEEP has, there was an authorization in the bond bill last year for $25 million to implement a heat pump plan that was cross-referenced to House Bill 5004 that was raised last year. That bill, as you know, did not get voted through both chambers, and so the governor's bond package for this year does not include that 25 million authorization. But we do have a number of different programs that we're implementing. We've seen a significant increase, nearly doubling of interest in demand for heat pumps across the state, in part because heat pumps not only provide for really efficient heating, but also really efficient cooling. And with more extreme weather and prolonged heat waves, such as we experienced last July, 40% of Connecticut residents are relying on window air conditioners to keep cool, which is they use a lot of energy and can drive up your electric bill. In addition, we know that there's customers such as those who are on electric resistance heat, which you may be one, as I'm recalling, can save over $1,000 or maybe more on their heating bills by switching to heat pumps for heating, because heat pumps use less energy. They're more efficient than, for example, baseboard electric resistance heating. So we are, monitoring House Bill 5004 this year, which includes provisions that would direct DEEP to do a plan related to heat pump adoption. And so, we're glad to be working with the Environment Committee or with the Bond Committee in terms of if there's any funding that would be implemented in parallel with that.
And thank you for your answer, Commissioner, because I have quite a few seniors in my district, and it's expensive to maintain them. A lot of them are old. Some of the equipment is old, and so they can't afford it, because I know an entire system can cost as much as $8,000. So I do appreciate that, because 504 didn't pass last year, that is still a conversation in your agency. So I appreciate that. 5004.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Mashinsky for a quick question.
Yep, same question that Senator Miller asked. I did not know the governor pulled back the 25 million because we didn't pass the bill last year.
Representative, we're having a hard time hearing you. If you could speak up a little bit.
Okay, I didn't realize that the governor had pulled back the 25 million because 5004 had not passed last year. That's distressing. So I hope we will put it back and put the language in the bond package this time instead of 5004 to lay out the priorities for that 25 million. I'm very nervous that the 100 million that the state won last July is not going to ever show up because of the federal actions to withhold it. So we may only have this 25 million to get started, and I do not want to lose it, nor the priorities. And I share with Senator Miller that the seniors in particular, who because of their age, they do need to use air conditioning. They do need to use heat. It's more important to them than other ages. Then we have to make sure that they get some of this priority money. So I hope we will put the money back again, and 5004 is moving forward, and hopefully it'll pass this year. So that was just my request that money go back in. as we did last year. And then I also had a question on the food waste. There is untapped funding that was approved by legislature, but that's as far as it went on coolers, refrigerators, and trucks for food banks to pick up the less perfect food from grocery stores and distribute it to people that need it. And I'm wondering if DEEP could work with Department of Social Services to get some of that money released so that the food providers at the community level can use that food. Sometimes it's only that they don't have the technology to preserve the food. Sometimes that's the only reason the food is thrown away. So is there a way the two agencies could work together to authorize the communities to buy some of these coolers and trucks, and therefore be able to use the food? Then it won't be waste, and it will be used by the community.
Thank you for the question, Representative Mashinsky. My name is Emma Semino. I'm Deputy Commissioner of the Environmental Quality Branch at DEEP. We've not talked to DSS about this, but thank you for flagging. We're more than happy to reach out to them and see if there's any collaboration we can do.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative, for your questions. And so, Commissioner, the subcommittee does want to thank you and your staff for being here. I believe your agency has the most bonding programs, and so you manage them very well, though. And so you also are responsible for our state's natural resources, and our state parks are utilized now more than ever. So we thank you and your entire staff for all that you do for our state.
The enormous privilege, and we appreciate the support that this committee has been providing. This is what we're here for. This is the work we like to do. And thank you for your trust in us to be able to administer these dollars.